Hello everyone! In this video we are going to talk about language mixing and how you can avoid it. For the sake of this video, we'll take language mixing as the act of mixing up two or more languages in conversation without meaning to, involuntarily. I'm not going to lie to you, you can't completely avoid mixing up languages. Anyone who speaks two or more languages will occasionally mix up languages. I am no exception, for sure. I would almost say that language mixing is a side effect of bilingualism. And yes, I just made language mixing way more cool. However, with the points I will cover in this video, and obviously with practice, you will be able to understand why you mix languages and how you can avoid doing it too much. The first point will be about levels of proficiency. When you are mixing languages, this is usually what happens. You're using a main language onto which another language sort of turns up uninvited and you start mixing the main language with that other language. And by main language, I'm not saying the strongest language, but the language in which you're trying to speak. One of the reasons for language mixing in this situation is down to proficiency. Let's look at an example together. So imagine you're a native speaker of Portuguese, you've been learning Italian for 3 or 4 months, and you're starting to get conversational in it. Well done, by the way. However, when you speak Italian, some Portuguese words pop up here and there, or maybe you use the wrong ending for conjugations, you know, that kind of stuff. Aside from the fact that the two languages are obviously fairly similar, there is a high chance that in this case, the reason why you're mixing up the two languages is because your Italian is weaker than your Portuguese. The reason basically is that because your knowledge of Italian is not 100% solid and secure, your brain will resort to Portuguese to fill in those knowledge gaps. That is why you might end up saying things like io como instead of io mangio. You do know the verb mangiare, but it's not fully acquired, so your brain will go for the Portuguese verb comer, which is acquired. I mean, it's your native language, remember? So how do you fix that? Well, the solution is not really exciting, nor sexy or miraculous, but you only have to become more proficient in your weaker language. Essentially, if your knowledge in the two languages is solid and secure, then your brain will not need to resort to the other language to fill in those gaps. That will take time, obviously, because you don't become proficient in the language overnight, but you will see that over time you will not mix as much. Another reason why you might be language mixing is because you're mentally tired. It's something that even monolinguals deal with. It's kind of like when you're tired, your brain sort of shuts down, I guess. So you'll find yourself in situations like, you know, you start a sentence, then you kind of lose track of what you were saying and you have to start again. Or maybe you'll forget a super basic word for no reason and you'll be like feeling stupid because you can't remember the word. And this is just your brain getting a little bit tired after a long day, for example. And the same principle applies to bilinguals or polyglots. For example, you'll be using one language and then you're so tired that you can't really control which language sort of comes out of your mouth. So you end up mixing everything up because when you're tired, it becomes harder to separate the languages. So everything is kind of out of control. The best thing you can do here, again, no miracle solution, is to just take a break or actually go to bed. You know, you might be just so tired that, you know, communicating will be difficult. I remember when I started speaking English on a regular basis, when I was speaking English for more than 1 or 2 hours, my brain was so tired that I needed a break, or to speak my native language. So in that case, rest was the solution. Over time, it does get easier to speak your target language for longer periods of time, but you need to allow your brain to get used to it. Another reason why you might be language mixing is because you might know a topic very well in your native language, let's say history or politics, but when you have to talk about it in another language, it might be difficult, not because you don't know the topic, because you know it in your native language, but because you don't have the vocab or grammar necessary to talk about it in your target language. It's kind of related to proficiency, which is the first point I covered in this video. But it's not necessarily linked to proficiency because if I take myself as an example, my native languages are French and Portuguese, and I'm obviously fluent in English. And I'm way more comfortable talking about linguistics in English because that's the language in which I really sort of studied it and researched it. But if I have to talk about linguistics in French, I sort of can, but I will not have a lot of the words that I need to explain complex ideas about linguistics because it's obviously a complex topic. So I will be very tempted to use a lot of English words because I won't know the words in French. So that's the same idea, essentially. And almost like in the first point, the solution is to just become more proficient. But in this case, you have to be a bit more specific. So if you want to be able to talk about history, for example, in Italian, then you just have to access a lot of content that talks about history in Italian. For example, books, documentaries, films, articles, etc. Because the more you access these resources, the more you will sort of pick up on the vocab that they use to talk about that topic. This, I think, is the main reason why it's important to access a lot of different types of content in your target language so that you are better equipped to talk about different topics with different people. Because you don't want to just talk about things that you like, although it's important. I think you also want to be able to discuss other topics, even topics you're not that interested in, but it's more the idea of being able to sort of fit in a conversation and not just go, I can't talk about this topic, so you're not engaging, if that makes sense. The last point I wanted to cover in this video is not so much related to why you mix languages, but rather a strategy that I use to reduce language mixing as much as possible. At the moment, I'm back to practicing Spanish, and that can be a problem because my native languages are French and Portuguese, and French is kind of okay because even though it's similar to Spanish, it's not so similar. However, Portuguese is a whole nother story. So I need to be really careful as to not mix up the two languages because sometimes one word is literally the same in the two languages and sometimes it's a different word or it's slightly different sometimes, and a lot of language mixing happen very easily in my case. So what I try to do is to be as self-conscious as possible as to what I say in Spanish. Instead of just sort of speaking Spanish mindlessly, I try to really think of whether the word I'm using in Spanish really is a Spanish word. Like I am 100% sure that this word is Spanish, not Portuguese. And when I'm not sure, either I will check on a dictionary or online, on a forum or on Twitter, whatever. Or if I'm talking to a Spanish person, I will check with them. So is this word Spanish or is that the right word? Does that make sense? No, I will use that kind of question. Obviously, I don't do it all the time because that could be annoying. And I'm 99% sure that most of the time the words that I use are in fact Spanish. But I know there is room for mistakes for the reasons I just outlined with Portuguese and all. So I try to sort of be aware. It's not necessarily easy to do so because it means that you have to sort of make more effort. So you can't always do it because otherwise your brain just goes super tired very quickly. But it's something that I've trained myself to do, so I almost kind of do it when I speak Spanish. It doesn't mean that I don't get mixed up anyway, I do sometimes, but I really think it helps me doing it much less. Alright, I hope you found this video useful and that you enjoyed it. I really love this topic of language mixing, which we also call code switching in the literature, in linguistics. And I will most likely make more videos about it in a maybe more scientific twist. Actually, let me know in the comment section if you'd like me to do that. And I will see you in a future video. Bye!